Stop killing your turbocharged Subaru. Yes, we hear it all the time. We hear the blow-off valves, we hear the mods, we hear the exhaust, we hear all these things. They look cool, they sound cool, but at the end of the day, you are slowly killing your WRX, your STI, or your Forester XT, Legacy GT, or whatever turbocharged Subaru you own by doing modifications poorly, wrongly, or just with no tune. In today's video, we're going to be talking about some of the most common mistakes that people make when modifying their Subaru turbocharged engine and why it destroys it and why it's made the WRX, STI, and other turbocharged Subaru engines the butt of most jokes in the automotive community. With that said, let's go ahead and jump into the video. So starting off, the modification that sounds cool but really isn't cool, the blow-off valve. It's one of the cheapest, easiest modifications that you can do to your Subaru, especially on the EJ series engines. A lot of people will buy a cheap blow-off valve and throw it on their car just because of the cool sound. But you are slowly hurting your Subaru with this modification. We're going to get into a little bit of why that is. So from the factory, your Subaru engine comes with what they call a recirculation valve. Now, the job of the recirculation valve is on a turbocharged engine, when you are building that boost, when that boosted high-pressure air is coming out of the turbocharger, it is forced into the engine, and it's led into the engine by the throttle body. But when you get off of the throttle, when you get off the gas pedal to slow down or to stop, that throttle plate slams shut. And when it does, all that high-pressure boost air hits it. It has to go somewhere. Well, if you had no system in place, that air would pressurize between the throttle body and the turbocharger and cause a stall condition, or possibly stall out the spinning of the turbocharger, which can damage the turbocharger. So what they do is they put a recirculation valve in the track between the throttle and the turbocharger. So when that throttle closes, that high pressure boost air has somewhere to go. That valve opens up, allows it to dump out back in front of the turbocharger. That is how the stock system works. Now, with a blow-off valve, instead of that being a recirculation valve, you have the blow-off valve, or an open-to-atmosphere valve, or a dump valve. So when that occurs, when the throttle shuts and that high-pressure boosted air comes into to hit the throttle plate, the blow-off valve opens up and dumps all of that pressurized air to the atmosphere under the hood in the engine bay. And that's where you get that big whoosh sound you get from a blow-off valve. Well, there's a problem with that, and there's a couple different problems with that. So on a Subaru turbocharged engine, it is a mass airflow equipped engine. It has a mass airflow sensor that the computer uses to measure, then meter the amount of air going into the engine. In the stock configuration with the recirculation valve, that air has already been calculated for and has been metered for. So when the recirculation valve opens, it recirculates that air back into the intake tract in front of the turbocharger, but behind the mass air sensor. That air, as far as the computer knows, is in there, and it calculates the fuel based on that amount of air contained in that system. When you put the blow-off valve on there, you are dumping all of that air out. It's no longer in that circulating system, and the computer no longer knows that it is missing. It had calculated a specific amount of fuel for that air. Once you dump that air out, it is now going to be running slightly rich. Now, it will fix this issue, but you will have a slight rich condition where you can start fouling your spark plugs, and in extreme conditions could start to wash your cylinders. So a blow-off valve might sound cool, be cheap, and an easy modification, but at the end of the day, you're just hurting the performance of your car. You are hurting the reliability of your car for a cool sound. And at the end of the day, it's just kind of dumb. You don't need a blow-off valve on your stock WRX or STI or Forester XT, Legacy GT, etc. You only need need a blow-off valve once you get to extremely high boost pressures, high horsepower, etc. But in a stock configuration, all you're going to do is dump air out, confuse your computer, and run slightly rich and possibly foul your plugs, possibly wash cylinder walls, and possibly damage your catalytic converter if you still have a factory exhaust in place. That unburned fuel, that rich condition, is going to go in the cat, and the cat's going to burn it up, and it can get overly hot, melt, and damage your catalytic converter. So, costly to put that cheap blow-off valve on there at the end of the day. So, while we're talking about airflow and air and fuel in the engine and the mass airflow sensor after the blow-off valve or recirculation valve issues, another big common issue with modifying a Subaru that's cheap, easy to install, and really requires a tune is a cold air intake. That's a lot of first-time modification for a lot of Subaru owners, is buy a cold air intake and put it on their car, but they don't tune it. And that is the problem, is not tuning for that cold air intake. Now, I know that Subaru gets a bad rep because people make jokes about the fact they need to be tuned for nearly every modification you make. And anytime you are modifying the amount, the volume of air or fuel going into the engine, you do need to tune for it, because the computer can learn to a degree, but it cannot adapt that quickly or that vastly to large changes. Now, the issue with a cold air intake, especially on a Subaru, comes into play via the mass airflow sensor, as we talked about at the beginning with the blow-off valve or recirculation valve. So you have an intake pipe that the mass airflow sensor sits down into. That mass air sensor is calculated for the diameter of that intake pipe. That is how the computer knows how much air is going through that section into the turbocharger, into the engine, because of a calculation that it knows that the pipe is this big and the sensor sits in it. When you go to a cold air intake, especially like cheap or generic ones, a lot of times they increase the size of that pipe. That sensor is no longer going to be accurately reading the volume of air going through there, because it's calculated for that stock pipe. That bigger pipe, it cannot calculate properly for. That is why you need a tune, and that is where the issues come into play. Now, I know a lot of you are thinking, well, we put cold air intakes on Hondas and on Mustangs and Camaros and Corvettes and all these different cars, and it doesn't really need a tune. Why is the Subaru different? Why is it a problem on a Subaru but not these other vehicles? Well, if you're looking at an LS or a Coyote or all these other vehicles, they're naturally aspirated. That V8, that V6, that four-cylinder can only pull so much air because it pulls air into it under vacuum, under the vacuum of those pistons coming down. They're pulling it in. Now, you can get a little bit colder air, a little bit denser air via a cold air intake on an NA engine, but you're not changing the volume because it can only suck via vacuum so much air. You're not able to increase the amount of air it can pull through that intake because it's pretty much set. The difference with the Subaru is that turbocharger. That turbocharger can pull more air. It can pull a greater volume of air, compress it, and force it into your combustion chamber. That is why it's different between a naturally aspirated V8 and a Subaru turbocharged four-cylinder. When you put that cold air intake on there and the computer can no longer calculate that airflow or know exactly how much air is coming in, a lot of times it calculates low. There's more air than it knows coming into that engine. The problem comes into, one, you have a lean condition, but a lean condition is very dangerous with a turbocharged application. If you've ever had a fire, just burning something outside, campfire, a brush fire, etc., if you take a leaf blower and blow air into that fire, what does it do? It burns hotter. It burns brighter. The flames get bigger. You add fuel, add oxygen to that flame, and it gets hotter, stoking the fire. Same thing happens in your combustion chamber. When that turbocharger is forcing more air than the computer knows, it can't properly add the amount of fuel needed for that air. So that air comes in and starts stoking your combustion temperatures. It starts getting hotter on your valves. It starts getting hotter on your piston. You need that fuel to come in and cool that down. So what happens is you start burning valves, you start melting pistons, you start fatiguing the pistons, you crack ringlands, you cause all of these issues because of a cold air intake. Now, not to sound dramatic, and it's not that big of a deal, but it's over time as you beat on the car, full throttle the car, bring that boost up with that cold air intake. The computer doesn't know. You're putting that extra air in there. You're raising those temperatures, and you're constantly getting hotter and hotter in there and causing more and more damage as time goes by. So that's why a cold air intake without a tune is super detrimental to your Subaru engine. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying do not modify your Subaru. I'm not saying keep it bone stock and do not do any mods. What I'm saying is when you do modify your Subaru, make sure you're using quality Subaru genuine parts or reputable aftermarket parts like IAG, HKS. We can go on and on and on, naming reputable companies that make good aftermarket and performance parts. Skip the nameless, no-name eBay junk, the generic crap that's out there for your car. Skip the junk on Amazon. Yes, you can buy reputable parts from eBay and Amazon, but I'm talking about the no-name brand, cheapola parts that look similar to the high-quality, good name brand parts, but are a third of the price. They're cheaper for a reason. Don't forget, tune your car. Every modification, you need a good tune. Find a good tuner. Find a good performance shop. Make a relationship with them. So when you do those modifications, you can tune for it. Stack modifications. Plan out what you want as far as your goal. Don't go out there thinking you're going to make 500-600 wheel horsepower immediately. Go and buy several modifications you want to put together. Talk to a shop, talk to a performance shop, talk to a tuner so they can help you pick and choose what will work best together and then have it tuned for that. So you're not just doing a cold air intake and going and tune it and then putting exhaust on it, going and tune it. That's kind of dumb. Stack your mods. Make sure the mods are going to work together and make sure you tune accordingly. Also with that, make sure you are data logging. Make sure that you are monitoring what needs to be monitored. Make sure you keep an eye on the health of your Subaru. Yes, it's great driving down the road and having, your RPM from your tachometer or having an oil pressure gauge or a coolant temperature gauge. But you need to monitor more than that when it comes to a turbocharged Subaru. You need to look at your air-fuel ratios. You need to look to see if you're running lean or if you're running rich. You need to monitor your boost pressure. You need to do a lot more. And there's a lot more to keep an eye out for to make sure you are keeping your Subaru in tip-top shape, not harming it, and are running optimally. At the end of the day, a turbocharged Subaru, WRX, STI, Forester XT, Legacy GT, etc. can be a very reliable and very fun car to own and drive and modify. You just have to follow the rules and do things properly so you're not left stranded on the side of the road with a costly repair bill. Guys, let me know your thoughts and feelings down in the comments below. Let me know your stories of modifying your turbocharged Subaru. Have you had these experiences, these bad experiences with bad parts or bad tuning and blown up your engine, melted a piston, or sent one through the side of the block? Or have you had really good luck with your turbocharged Subarus for years and years? Let me know your stories, thoughts, and feelings down below. Thank you guys so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed the video. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for future Subaru and tool content. I'll see you guys in the next one.